Hi everyone, you're watching In English with Lisa, and this is another video from the Listening Practice series. Every story is created and spoken by me. No AI voices here, just real English spoken at a pace to help you improve. These videos are grouped by level, from complete beginners, A1, to very advanced, C2. So there's something for everyone. Ready to listen? Grab your notebook, relax, and enjoy today's story. Welcome to today's short story, The Silence Between Notes. Chapter 1, The Window Listener. Margaret Rhodes hadn't touched her piano in nearly 8 months. The elegant blank grand stood silent by the bay window overlooking the sea, gathering a thin film of dust that caught the morning light. At 67, her fingers were still nimble enough. Arthritis had been kind to her hands, if nowhere else, but the will to play had abandoned her after David's passing. Today marked the anniversary, 1 year without her husband of 42 years. Margaret rose early, made her tea, and stood by the window watching waves crash against the rocky shore of Cliff Haven. This small coastal town had been their retirement dream. Now it was just hers, a dream that had lost its luster. She wrapped her cardigan tighter around her shoulders. April brought unpredictable weather to the coast. Sunshine one moment, chilling rain the next. Just like life, she thought bitterly. As she turned to leave the window, a flash of movement caught her eye. Down below, a figure in a dark blue hoodie settled on the public bench that faced her house. A teenager, by the looks of it, with a backpack tossed carelessly beside the bench. Margaret frowned. It was Tuesday, just past 9 in the morning. Shouldn't the child be in school? For 3 days in a row, the same scene unfolded. The teenager, a girl, Margaret had determined, with short dark hair often hidden under her hood, would appear around 9 and stay for an hour or so before disappearing. She never caused trouble, just sat there staring at Margaret's house or scribbling in a notebook. On the 4th day, curiosity got the better of Margaret. She marched outside, her sensible shoes crunching on the gravel path. "Excuse me," she called, approaching the bench. "Shouldn't you be in school?" The girl jumped, startled by Margaret's sudden appearance. She looked up, revealing striking green eyes and a face speckled with freckles. I was just," she stammered, quickly stuffing her notebook into her backpack. "You were just sitting outside my house, again." Margaret crossed her arms, "for the 4th day in a row." The girl's cheeks flushed. "I'm sorry if I bothered you. I'll go." As she stood to leave, Margaret noticed the girl's worn sneakers and the fraying edges of her jeans. Something in her defiant yet vulnerable posture reminded Margaret of herself at that age. Proud, private, and perhaps a little lost. "What's your name?" Margaret asked, her tone softening. Zoe Crawford." "And why aren't you in school, Zoe Crawford?" Zoe shrugged, avoiding eye contact. "School's boring. I learn more out here." Margaret raised an eyebrow. "On a bench?" "I like it here," Zoe said simply. "It's quiet, and sometimes—" She hesitated, then continued in a rush. "Sometimes I hear the piano." Margaret felt her heart skip a beat. "Piano?" "Last year, I used to walk by and hear someone playing. It was beautiful." Zoe's eyes lit up with genuine enthusiasm. "Bach, Chopin, Debussy. I recognize the pieces from my music appreciation class." Margaret stared at the girl, speechless. Last year, before David's illness had worsened, she had played daily, the music drifting through open windows in the warm months. "That was me," Margaret finally said. "I haven't played in some time." "Why not?" Zoe asked, the directness of youth cutting straight to the question Margaret had been avoiding. Life happens, Margaret replied curtly, unwilling to explain grief to this stranger. You should be in school. Zoe's face closed off. Right, sorry to bother you. As the girl gathered her things, Margaret surprised herself by asking, Do you play? No, Zoe admitted. My grandmother tried to teach me when I was little, but then she died. I just like listening. A moment of understanding passed between them, a shared recognition of loss that needed no words. I suppose, Margaret said carefully, if you're going to skip school anyway, you might as well do it somewhere warm. It looks like rain. Zoe's eyes widened in surprise. Are you inviting me in? Margaret wasn't sure who was more surprised, Zoe or herself. For tea, she clarified quickly, and only if you promise to tell me the real reason you're not in school. A small smile tugged at Zoe's lips. I can do that. As they walked toward her house, Margaret cast a glance at her piano through the window. The dust-covered instrument seemed to be waiting, patient as always, for fingers to bring it back to life. Chapter 1 Comprehension Questions. Number 1. Why hadn't Margaret played her piano for 8 months? A. Her piano was broken. B. Her fingers were too arthritic to play. C. She lost the will to play after her husband died. The correct answer is C. She lost the will to play after her husband died. Number 2. Why was Zoe sitting on the bench outside Margaret's house? A. She was waiting for a friend. B. She liked to listen to the piano music. C. She was homeless and had nowhere else to go. The correct answer is B. She liked to listen to the piano music. Number 3. What did Margaret and Zoe discover they had in common? A. They both loved playing the piano. B. They were both suffering from grief and loss. C. They both disliked the local school. The correct answer is B. They were both suffering from grief and loss. Chapter 2 Discordant Notes. Your playing is rusty, Zoe commented from her spot on the window seat, where she had taken to sitting during her now regular visits. 3 weeks had passed since their first encounter. After learning that Zoe was struggling in school, not academically but socially, and that her single father worked long shifts that left her alone much of the time, Margaret had reluctantly allowed the girl to visit. Initially, they had just shared tea and awkward conversation. Yesterday, however, Margaret had finally sat down at her piano. Thank you for that insightful critique, Margaret responded dryly, closing the piano lid with more force than necessary. Perhaps you'd prefer to practice yourself. Zoe shook her head quickly. No way, I told you I don't play. And I told you anyone can learn. Their strange friendship had developed into a routine. Zoe came 3 days a week, always after checking in at school for morning attendance, before slipping away during her free period and lunch. Margaret pretended to believe this arrangement was legitimate, though she suspected otherwise. Why did you stop? Zoe asked, abruptly changing the subject. She had a habit of doing this, diving into personal questions without warning. Margaret sighed. My husband died, David. He loved hearing me play. So you stopped because it reminded you of him? Something like that. Margaret stood and walked to the kitchen. Would you like more tea? Zoe followed her. That's stupid. Margaret turned, shocked. Excuse me? If he loved hearing you play, then stopping is like. Zoe struggled for words. It's like letting him die twice. The teacup in Margaret's hand clattered against the saucer. You don't understand grief, young lady. Don't I? Zoe's voice was quiet but firm. My mom left when I was 8. Just packed up and left. No goodbye, no explanation. And then my grandmother died 2 years later. She was the one who played piano with me. Margaret felt her anger deflate. I'm sorry. Zoe shrugged. Dad works all the time now. He tries, but he's tired. Home is just empty. And school? The kids there decided I was weird after my mom left. It stuck. Joey traced a pattern on the countertop. It's easier to be alone. Margaret recognized the defense mechanism, the protective shell of isolation she herself had constructed after David's death. Playing helps me remember my grandmother, Zoe continued. Not the sad parts, but how it felt to sit beside her on the bench, her hands guiding mine over the keys. Margaret studied the girl's face, seeing past the defiant exterior to the pain underneath. Would you like me to teach you? To play properly, I mean. Zoe's head snapped up, surprise and wariness battling in her expression. Why would you do that? Because, Margaret said slowly, I think we both need to remember what it feels like to create something beautiful instead of hiding from it. Zoe considered this for a long moment. Okay, she finally agreed. But I won't be any good. No one is at first, Margaret said, returning to the piano and opening the lid once more. That's the point of practice. As Zoe hesitantly joined her on the bench, Margaret placed the girl's fingers on the keys and guided her through a simple scale. The notes rang out clear and true in the space that had been silent for too long. Music isn't just about the notes, Margaret explained. It's about the silence between them. Without the pauses, there's no rhythm, no breath, no meaning. Zoe nodded, her brow furrowed in concentration as she repeated the scale. Neither of them heard the knock at first. When it came again, louder, they both jumped. The man at the door wore a tired expression that hardened when he saw Zoe at the piano. Dad, Zoe explained, jumping up. The school called, he said tightly, again. Margaret stepped forward. Mr. Crawford, I'm Margaret Rhodes. I can explain. You can explain why you've been helping my daughter skip school? His voice was controlled, but angry. Dad, it's not like that, Zoe protested. Get your things, he told her, now. As Zoe reluctantly gathered her backpack, Margaret addressed Mr. Crawford. I apologize for any misunderstanding. Zoe has been visiting me, but I assumed she had permission to be here during her free periods. She doesn't. His jaw was set. And I'd appreciate if you didn't encourage her to lie to me or skip classes. I'm a retired piano teacher, Margaret said, the lie slipping out easily. I've been giving Zoe lessons. Mr. Crawford looked surprised. Zoe hasn't touched a piano since her grandmother died. Perhaps that's why she sought one out. Margaret met his gaze steadily. She has talent. Something in his expression shifted. Be that as it may, she needs to be in school. Of course, Margaret agreed. Perhaps we could arrange proper lessons, after school or weekends. Before he could respond, Zoe returned, her face a mask of teenage stoicism that couldn't quite hide her distress. We'll discuss this later, Mr. Crawford told Margaret, his tone slightly less hostile. Come on, Zoe. As they left, Margaret caught Zoe's backward glance, a silent plea not to give up on her. The door closed, and once again the house fell into silence. Chapter 2 Comprehension Questions. Number 1. What arrangement did Zoe and Margaret develop? A. Zoe would come 3 days a week during her free period. B. Zoe would live with Margaret during the weekends. C. Margaret would visit Zoe at school to give her lessons. The correct answer is A. Zoe would come 3 days a week during her free period. Number 2. Why did Zoe say that Margaret stopping playing the piano was stupid? A. Because Margaret was wasting her talent. B. Because it was like letting her husband die twice. C. Because the piano would get damaged from lack of use. The correct answer is B. Because it was like letting her husband die twice. Number 3. How did Mr. Crawford discover where Zoe had been going? A. He followed her one day. B. Margaret called him. C. The school called him. The correct answer is C. The school called him. Chapter 3. The Harmony Beyond. The next 2 weeks passed without a visit from Zoe. Margaret found herself watching the bench outside her window, hoping for the familiar blue hoodie to appear. Instead, she received a phone call. "Ms. Rhodes, this is Nathan Crawford, Zoe's father." Margaret's heart raced. "Mr. Crawford, is everything all right?" "Yes, well, no, not exactly." He sounded exhausted. "Zoe's been difficult since we left your house, refusing to talk, skipping classes again. Her teacher says she's falling behind." Margaret waited, unsure where this was heading. "She misses the piano," he finally said, "and apparently she misses you." "I see," Margaret replied cautiously. "Look, I work late shifts at the hospital. I'm a nurse. Zoe's alone too much. That's part of the problem. If you were serious about lessons," he trailed off. "I was," Margaret confirmed, hope rising in her chest. "I'd be happy to teach her." They arranged for Zoe to come 3 afternoons a week after school. Nathan would drop her off on his way to work, and Margaret would ensure she completed her homework before they began the piano lessons. When Zoe arrived that Saturday, her initial wariness quickly gave way to excitement when Margaret led her to the piano. "First," Margaret said, "we clean." She handed Zoe a soft cloth, and together they wiped away the months of dust from the grand piano. As they worked, Margaret spoke about David, how they'd met at a concert where she was performing, his complete inability to carry a tune, but profound love of music, the way he'd sit in this very room each evening as she practiced. "After he died," Margaret admitted, "playing felt like reopening a wound. The music reminded me of all I'd lost." Zoe nodded, understanding beyond her years in her eyes. "My dad was the same after Mom left. He packed away all her photos. And now? Now he sometimes looks at them again. Not often, but sometimes." They finished cleaning in companionable silence. When they sat together on the bench, Margaret guided Zoe through proper posture, hand positioning, and basic exercises. "It's harder than it looks," Zoe complained after an hour of practice. "Most worthwhile things are," Margaret replied, again from the beginning. The weeks turned into months. Summer arrived with its long golden evenings. Zoe's visits became the highlight of Margaret's week. The girl had a natural ear and, despite her initial frustration, a determination that served her well. Her father began staying for dinner occasionally before his shifts, bringing groceries to contribute to the meals. One evening in late July, as the sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Margaret heard a tentative melody from the piano. She paused in the doorway, watching Zoe play, not a practice piece, but the Debussy that had been David's favorite. The girl's technique was still developing, but she played with feeling, allowing the music to breathe in all the right places. Margaret felt tears well in her eyes, not just of sadness, but of something else. A bittersweet recognition that life continues, transforms, creates new patterns from old memories. Zoe noticed her and stopped, embarrassed. "Sorry, I was just trying it out." "Don't apologize," Margaret said, coming to sit beside her. "It was lovely." "Not as good as when you play it." "Different," Margaret corrected. "Music isn't about perfection, it's about expression." Zoe considered this. "Will you play it with me? The duet version you showed me." Margaret hesitated only briefly before nodding. As they began to play together, the rich harmonies filled the room, drifting out through the open windows towards the sea. The music built between them, each supporting the other, creating something neither could have produced alone. Outside on the path, Nathan Crawford paused on his way to the door, listening to the intertwining melodies. Through the window he watched his daughter and the elderly pianist, their hands moving across the keys in perfect synchronization, faces intent yet peaceful. In that moment, Margaret understood what David had always told her. Music never truly dies, it just finds new instruments to play through. The silence between notes wasn't emptiness but possibility, the breath before the next phase begins. As the final notes faded, Zoe looked up at Margaret with a smile that bridged generations of loss and discovery. "Again?" she asked. Margaret nodded, positioning her hands beside Zoe's on the keys. "Again." Together they began once more, filling the silence with harmony. Chapter 3 Comprehension Questions. Number 1. Why did Nathan Crawford call Margaret after 2 weeks? A. To threaten legal action. B. Because Zoe was being difficult and missing the piano. C. To apologize for his behavior. The correct answer is B, because Zoe was being difficult and missing the piano. Number 2. What activity did Margaret and Zoe do first when lessons officially began? A. They cleaned the dust off the piano. B. They practiced scales. C. They studied music theory. The correct answer is A. They cleaned the dust off the piano. Number 3. What does Margaret realize at the end of the story? A. That she should start performing in concerts again. B. That music never truly dies but finds new instruments to play through. C. That Zoe should become a professional pianist. The correct answer is B. That music never truly dies but finds new instruments to play through. Epilogue. 2 years later, Margaret's living room was transformed. Where silence had once reigned, music now flowed freely. The grand piano gleamed in the afternoon light, recently tuned and well used. Zoe, now 17, organized the sheet music for the small recital they had planned. Her grades had improved dramatically, and she had been accepted to study music therapy at the university just an hour away. "Nervous?" Margaret asked, arranging chairs in a semicircle. "A little," Zoe admitted, "but Dad invited some colleagues from the hospital, so at least they'll clap politely." Margaret smiled. Nathan had reduced his night shifts to spend more evenings with his daughter. The three of them often shared meals, forming an unexpected family of sorts. The doorbell rang, the first guests arriving. On the wall hung a new photograph, Margaret and Zoe at the piano, with David's portrait visible in the background. Beside it was an older photo of young Zoe with her grandmother at another piano. "Ready?" Margaret asked, straightening Zoe's collar. Zoe nodded, taking a deep breath. "I'm playing the Debussy for Mr. Rhodes," she said quietly. "Do you think he would have liked my interpretation?" Margaret squeezed her hand. He would have loved it. Not just the music, but what it represents, that life continues, beautiful and unexpected. Together, they went to welcome their guests. The end. Thank you for watching this video until the end. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and hit the notifications bell. This isn't an artificial intelligence. The story was narrated by In English with Lisa. I'm a native speaking teacher, and this is my real voice. If you have any questions, please leave a comment. I love hearing from all of you. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notifications bell so you never miss a new lesson. Plus, you'll help my channel grow and you'll give me the possibility to create other videos that you can watch for free. See you soon. Bye.